What is happening, everybody? Jameson Hutchison here with IDP Plus, welcoming you to Week 1 NFL DFS. Hope everybody's doing well. If you guys are betting this week, I just want to start off real quick. Fanduel is for offering $50 in bonus bets for anybody who deposits $10. So just check out idpplus.com/fanduel and get that today. So just a few notes. I know it's week 1. There's a lot of just randomness and trying to capitalize on all that, but a few notes I want to talk about before we get started. Over on FanDuel, if there's some things that they've added this year, over on DraftKings, they usually have bonuses. So especially a 300-yard passer will get 3 points. A 100-yard receiving wide receiver or rushing running back will get 3 points over there. They've brought that over to FanDuel, so that goes a little different into the as far as scoring goes, and just something to keep in mind when you're building guys like CJ Stroud, possibly, Geno Smith in the spot that he's in today ends up being, kind of a nice value there and something just to kind of add on to. But other than that, if you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, if you want me to pray over your fantasy football team, questions, whatever, throw them in the chat. I'll try to get to them as quick as I can. So just I think the only other thing that I've got, if one more thing over on FanDuel specifically, if you are playing the main slate today, just remember that the Sunday night football game between the Rams and the Lions is on the main slate today. I'm not sure if that has gone kind of slipped through the cracks for some of the people, but like I said, if you are playing that today, just make sure be cognizant that that is a part of the deal. So, but other than that, let's get started. I want to start with the early window here. We're going to just kick it off with the Texans and the Colts. I think this is a game that a lot of people are excited about, me especially. CJ Stroud is probably in one of the best spots in the entire weekend. CJ Stroud, I believe it was Fantasy Points that had this stat here, has been done his best against cover 3 defense, and that's what Gus Bradley, the defensive coordinator for the Colts, runs the most. So I just think it's a really nice spot for him, especially for Nico Collins. I think Nico Collins is a fun one today. He's probably going to be one of my favorite wide receivers on this entire slate. And, the first game that Nico and CJ Stroud played against the Colts in week 2, CJ Stroud went for 384 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then last year in week 18, with the playoffs on the line, 264 yards and 2 touchdowns again. So the Colts haven't upgraded anything in the secondary. And I just think that CJ Stroud is probably going to be a little bit under-owned. I think there's some other guys that a lot of people are going to end up playing, Josh Allen, Anthony Richardson on the other side. And it just kind of sets up really nicely for Stroud to kind of sneak through. I don't think Stephon Diggs is going to get played a lot this week, but I do think that he will go under-owned and probably a fun GPP play, if anything. But like I said, the CJ Stroud doubles is probably what I'm going to be playing the most. I think if you are playing that game, the way I'm going to play it is if the Texans kind of get on a lead on the Colts and the Colts are playing keep up. I think a lot of people think they're going to go back and forth, but just I think this game's going to be up tempo. I think Shane Steichen's going to try to play really fast with Anthony Richardson, but I do think he can make some mistakes. No Josh Downs today, so we will get Adonai Mitchell in his first NFL start. He's going to get a pretty prominent role. He's going to be the wide receiver 2 for Indy, and then Alec Pierce is the wide receiver 3. As far as running backs go, Jonathan Taylor is pretty expensive. If the Colts are going to win, I think they're going to play it through him. So probably a good play, probably more of a tournament play, to be quite honest, because I still worry about his third down role. And then on the other side, a guy who's really going to go sneak, underneath would be Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon definitely has the ceiling. He's about the only guy there in Houston. And just if you want to get a little bit contrarian, play the opposite way of it, you play Joe Mixon, kind of get some leverage off the passing attack for the Texans and CJ Stroud. So as far as the tight ends go, Dalton Schultz and Kylan Granson are kind of If you need a run back, the only person I didn't talk about is Michael Pittman. I don't love him today, especially for his price. I just don't think his ceiling is quite there. But Kylan Granson, as far as tight end go, if you're getting really cute, that's probably more of a DraftKings play. And then Dalton Schultz will go under the radar. You can kind of mix and match your wide receivers. like I said with CJ Stroud, I think a lot of people are going to play Dank Dell for his price, but I do think that Nico Collins probably be my favorite. Stephon Diggs will go under the radar, and Dalton Schultz probably won't get clicked near as much as he needs to, and it ends up being a really pretty sick spot. So if you want to do the CJ Stroud double, you can do it with Nico and Dalton Schultz, and still have some money to go elsewhere. It's a little pricey, but other than that, the only other thing I want to talk about here is Anthony Richardson. He's going to be probably one of the most played quarterbacks in cash, especially over on FanDuel, where he is. Give me just a second here. 8,300. So he's a little pricey, but you get Josh Allen $900 more, and then outside that, Kyler Murray, some of these other guys. It's a pretty goofy slate, just because a lot of the big hitters have played on the night games and aren't on the main slate. So I just think that Anthony Richardson is probably a fine cash play. I don't think he's going to bring anybody with him, especially playing tournaments. So I'd play him in cash, and then I'm probably staying away from him in GPPs this week. But that's, I think, all I've got for the Texans game. And then the next game here, Patriots at the Bengals. I believe that Jamar Chase is going to play, and I know we've got to have the Andre Yoshivas talk because he's probably going to be the most highest played owner on the slate. And he's going to be, pretty much salary relief for a lot of these. Especially if you're playing cash, you're probably playing Andre Yoshivas, so you can play Tyreek Hill and Amon-Ra St. Brown in the same lineup. You could probably sneak in Josh Allen if you make things work as well, but I will stay away from. I'm going to be underweight on Andre Yoshivas today. I'll probably have him in my cash lineup over on FanDuel, but I'm not going to play him in tournaments at all. I just don't see the ceiling there. I think if you want to get really cute and contrarian, it seems like Jamar Chase will be limited today, but I don't think as far as the high-end wide receivers go, people are going to play him. So it's probably a very fun tournament play if you want to pair him with Joe Burrow. I think a lot of people are scared of him. But my favorite play of the game today is probably going to be Zach Moss. And if you want to correlate him with Bengals defense, we've talked about how bad the Patriots offensive line is for the last couple months. They have Jacoby Brissett, who will end up, we're just not really sure. It's a new regime. Bill Belichick's finally gone. Alex Van Pelt's a new offensive coordinator. But just as far as that goes, I don't think that the Patriots are going to be able to keep up. But at the same time, I'm not sure if Cincinnati's going to be able to pull away. Cincinnati, the last couple years in game ones have been absolutely horrific. They are a very slow starter. And especially with T. Higgins out, Jamar Chase, they've talked about him being limited. But it's Jamar Chase, man. I don't know what all he has to do to be in game shape there. But like I said, I think Jamar Chase will go under-owned. A lot of people might click on Zach Moss. And let me check over here. I'm going to go on DraftKings because I know he's going to be cheaper over on DraftKings. Let's see. Yeah, 5,000 over on DraftKings. A lot of people are going to click him today. Or I shouldn't say a lot, but I think a decent amount of people will. And that's not a play that I want to go to. I would rather play Zach Moss. I think that he can end up getting a couple touchdowns. And if you correlate him with the Bengals defense and think that they get a couple sacks, maybe a pick six or a fumble return for a touchdown, you're going to have to pay for him, but I think it ends up working out really well. So Chase Brown, 5,400 over on FanDuel. And then on both sides, Bengals defense, 4,800. Trey Hendrickson, is on the defensive line, but outside that, it's not like the Cincinnati's defensive line is that great. You're really just banking on the Patriots offensive line just being that bad and just the offense as a whole. So on New England side, the only thing I would offer would be Hunter Henry if he ends up kind of being the top receiving target for Jacoby Brissett. But other than that, I'm not going to play any Patriots. I wanted to play this game at the beginning of the week, but the news kind of got a little out of hand, and I just think this kind of going to be a slog. It's going to be slower. I would have loved to play Joe Burrow in this spot, returning healthy, and I think a lot of people are scared about that. But I'm just not sure if I just want to get there anymore. But it's probably a good GPP play if you want to go that route. So good morning to you, JJ. Hope all is well. Happy week one. Next game, Steelers at the Falcons. We'll get rid of another kind of goofy game. We don't know yet. We'll probably find out within the hour if Russell Wilson or Justin Fields is going to play. If Justin Fields is going to play, I believe he's going to get ownership. We saw last year with Luke Getsy and the Chicago Bears that he would just kind of run wild. But the other part of that is he will take a ton of sacks, and Falcons defense will probably be one of the highest owned plays on the slate that just got Matthew Judon. It's not perfect, but I mean, Steelers' offensive line preseason was terrible. You know that they're going to run the ball. You know they're going to try to make it really slow. So if they can keep the score down, and like I said, just pick up sacks if Justin Fields sits in the pocket for 5 seconds and gets obliterated, or even Russell Wilson on the hamstring injury. You know he's not going to be mobile. That used to be part of his game, why he did so well with Seattle. But Falcons defense over on FanDuel is 3,600. That's probably one of the better plays. Going to be very owned, but I'm definitely going to kind of lean into the chalk there. And then over on DraftKings, just give me 1 second while this loads. Let's see here. Falcons. They're up there. They're 3,300 over on DraftKings. But I will be playing Falcons defense kind of across the board. So I'll definitely have them in my cash lineup, and then I'll mix and match in tournaments. But on the Steelers side, if you want to get real goofy, if Justin Fields plays, I don't hate it with George Pickens if you want to get like real low ownership, but I'm just going to stay away. You know, Najee Harris and Jalen Warren. Probably Najee this week if I had to pick a running back from the Steelers, if you think this game is just going to be, you know, if he can get there on volume. But I'm not going to play them. They're not in my player pool. Falcons side, pretty interesting. I don't think anybody's going to play Kirk Cousins this week if you want to kind of play into the unknown. Kyle Pitts has a random injury that we don't really know about, but if he plays, I think Kyle Pitts is going to have some ownership, especially in cash games, just for the higher upside tight end. I'm very interested to see Drake London's ownership. I don't think a lot of people are going to play him. I think a lot of people are just going to pay up, play Tyreek. But and then the other thing, if you want to do some correlation, if you want to pay up for Bijan Robinson, he gets very pricey over on DraftKings. He is, I believe, the top guy on the slate, second one at 7,700. And then over on FanDuel, he is the top running back as far as payouts go. He's 8,800. So him and Jonathan Taylor flip flop. But if you want to correlate, if you think Bijan hits big, pay up for him. I think he'll probably go under owned just because there's some better running back spots. But I do think that he ends up being probably a better tournament play than cash, just because I'd rather pay up for the wide receivers in cash, like Tyreek Hill, who we'll get to here in a little bit. But other than that, Pat Freiermuth, you probably play him as a kind of a punt tight end over on DraftKings. And then for the rest of this Falcons stuff, I'm not really playing this game outside of Bijan and Falcons defense. But next game, Panthers at the Saints. Something kind of interesting. The road division underdogs have covered at a 60% clip the last couple years. I think it goes back the last 5 years. And Panthers being +4. I bet them to cover and to win today. Just a little freebie there. Jatavion Sanders over on DraftKings will be a punt tight end that I will play a little bit. He's basically the last man standing in the Panthers tight end room with the rest of the guys. I think Ian Thomas, Tommy Tremble, both those guys are hurt. So if you are punting and just hoping to God somebody catches a football, Jatavion Sanders, the rookie, sets up well there. Deontay Johnson is going to be a high floor guy. I don't think he's a guy who can break the slate, but I do think he is a very comfortable click at his price. If you want to play him, especially in cash, I think he's a guy who can get 15, 20 points today. Especially better DraftKings play than FanDuel just because of the PPR aspect of it. But I do think that he will do very well. I would love to tout my boy Xavier Leggett today, but I just can't do it. I think he's going to be mixed in, but a guy will be playing a decent amount across the board is Chuba Hubbard. I believe he is in my cash lineup over on FanDuel, and I don't think he's going to be clicked in tournaments, but I do think he is a guy. We've heard Dave Canales, the head coach, the entire year. He said, you know, we're going to be stubborn running the football. Outside of him, it's him and Miles Sanders, who I can't do it. Not enough drugs in the world to make me do that one. So Chuba Hubbard is a guy who I think will end up getting a huge workload. We saw it last year. I do think that the Panthers are much improved, especially on the offensive line. Added some pieces up front there. I do think that they can kind of keep this game close. And as far as the game script goes, I think Chuba Hubbard will work nicely there. I'm not playing any Bryce Young. If you want to get real cute in large field tournaments, I think you can do it. You can pair him with as far as like him and Deontay Johnson. If you want to do Chris Olave as a bring back, ends up being pretty cheap and get elsewhere. But that's very large field, like MME stuff, but that I don't play. So I just can't do that. But on the other side, don't love the Saints today, but I know Alvin Kamara is going to be a very comfortable click at his price just because he's going to get receptions. He's probably better over on DraftKings, like I said, with the PPR aspect. I don't think he's going to have a lot of rushing yards, but I do think he's going to be played. He will be one of these mix and match running backs in cash games, along with Chuba Hubbard. And I just, he's not a click that I want to make, but I do think he will get some of the play today. And let me check his price real quick. Over on FanDuel, he is 7,100. He is in this tier with like Zach Moss, Devon Achane, Joe Mixon. He's not a guy that you want to play, and it's kind of weird. He played best ball all summer, and everybody said Alvin Kamara sucks, and then he ends up being one of the better plays when you're playing DFS. But that's just kind of how it goes sometimes. But and then over on DraftKings, give me just a second. I know he's higher owned or higher priced over on DraftKings. Let's see here, 6,700. So just kind of ends up in that tier. Like I said, I think he's going to have some ownership. Chris Olave is going to go under the radar today. If he ends up getting locked on by Derek Carr, I think he can end up being one of these higher upside wide receiver plays as far as GPP goes. And then the wild card, as always, will be Taysom Hill. I've got him in one lineup today over on FanDuel as far as a tournament play, and I've got him correlated with Chuba Hubbard. But other than that, I just can't do it. I would rather pay up at tight end on this slate, but I think there's basically 4 tight ends, and then the rest of them kind of or whatever. So Taysom Hill, Trey McBride's in a great game environment. Say what you want about Dalton Kincaid. If he gets the more workload, he's in a great spot. And then Sam Laporta, like I said, who will be playing tonight and who we'll get into here in a little bit. But the last thing I'm going to play here, I think both defenses are viable, but I prefer Panthers defense this week. I think the New Orleans offensive line is terrible, and I know the Panthers defense isn't great, but Derek Carr ends up being a sitting duck a lot of the time. So I'm going to be playing, I'm just going to punt defense. That's usually how I play DFS and just hope that, somebody gets a pick six or a touchdown. Maybe we'll get bad Derek Carr today. So that's just kind of where I'm going to go with this game. There's not a whole lot else I want to talk about. Rashid Shaheed might be probably better play over on DraftKings, but other than that, I'm trying to stay away from this game outside of running back and defense. Next game, the Vikings at the Giants. This is kind of a fun one, I think, and this is going to go way under-owned. The one guy I do want to talk about is Devin Singletary. I think he's got a great floor, and then he's also got a pretty high ceiling today. And you can play him in cash games. I think he's pretty safe as far as cash games goes. I know everybody's scared about Danny Dimes and all that stuff, but week one, you got to kind of play into variance, got to play into the unknown. If everybody thinks this Giants offense is going to suck, and if you think this game can kind of shoot out a little bit, play into that. I know it's been 2 years ago, but this Vikings and Giants game kind of had similar outside of Saquon Barkley that went off 2 years ago, and it was just kind of went under the radar. But Devin Singletary's in a great spot outside of Tyrone Tracy, who got hurt in the preseason. Not really much out there, and Brian Daboll has played him everywhere he's been. Played in Buffalo a little bit, and then the rest of the Giants side, Malik Neighbors, I'm very interested to see his ownership. I think he's in a great spot today. I think it's a very fun tournament play. And if you want to stack him with Daniel Jones, if Daniel Jones runs, he will pay off his salary, quite easily. And then if you think that he's going to lock on to Malik Neighbors, and then he can bring back, say, with Justin Jefferson or, Jordan Addison, maybe even Aaron Jones, who we'll get to here in a minute. But outside of that, I'm not playing any of the rest of the wide receivers for the Giants, so like Wando Robinson, Darius Slayton, Jalen Hyatt. That's probably more for large field stuff if you think you can get there. But I do think that Malik Neighbors is viable today. Probably more of a tournament play than cash. I hate to do the cop out there, but I do think that it sets up very nicely for him. And I just don't think a lot of people want to click on the Giants. But on the other side, Sam Darnold will get his revenge game, the place that, he saw Ghost and got mono at the Meadowlands in New York. He gets Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and Kevin O'Connell as a play caller. I think he is a very fun tournament play today. You could do the double, bring it back with Malik Neighbors. I know Justin Jefferson's pretty pricey, but he ends up setting up nicely. Like I said, Sam Darnold is like bottom of the barrel pricing today. Let me check real quick. Daniel Jones 6,800, and then Sam Darnold 6,700. We've seen him kind of have a game or two blow up before he just goes all out of whack. Justin Jefferson is in this tier with like Jamar Chase. CD Lamb's not in a great spot today, going up against the Browns. Jamar Chase, people think that he's limited, and then it kind of leaves Tyreek Hill, who is going to be very well owned. We'll talk about that here in a little bit, and then Justin Jefferson and Amon-Ra St. Brown. So Justin Jefferson's probably going to go under owned. And I just think it's a great tournament play. I probably wouldn't play him in cash, but we saw him last year with some of these guys that, Jaron Hall, they brought the astronaut in and Josh Dobbs, and, Justin Jefferson got there when he was healthy last year. But another guy who's probably not going to get a whole lot clicked on is Aaron Jones because he's an older back, but we saw at the end of the year he was really good. I think he's a pretty fun tournament play. I would not play him in cash just because I do think his volume is going to be limited. Ty Chandler will get some of the workload too, but like I said, I think this game you can kind of play around with if you want to do the Sam Darnold double and bring it back with, Devin Singletary or Malik Neighbors, or if you want to get real cute and large field stuff, play Danny Dimes. I don't think anybody's going to click on him, and if he's rushing, that's what you want. If Daniel Jones is rushing, that's part of the floor, and then if he throws 2 touchdowns, we've seen 2 years ago. This offense was very viable with Brian Daboll. You just hope that offensive line stays up. So, like I said, this is a pretty fun game here that I think will go under owned, but I think it's got a lot of ways to kind of get there. But next game, Titans at the Bears. This is another fun one that you can lean into. A lot of hype on Caleb Williams, and the Bears have a 25-point team total, one of the highest on the entire slate. Little worried he doesn't get there. I think this Titans team is a lot better than people think. I think a lot of people are going to try to play Caleb Williams today with, DJ Moore. I think Rome Odunze at his price will get played some. I'm very worried about it just because of Shane Waldron. I think there's kind of a limit on the ceiling. I know Caleb Williams is cheap enough if you want to try to play him before he breaks out and his price goes up. I think it's fair, but just not a click that I'm going to make today, but I do think some people are going to try to play him. But on the other side, I'm very interested in Will Levis, especially in large field. We saw last year with Jake Browning when Brian Callahan was calling plays for the Bengals, they are just going to pass the ball, and they're going to give – whether Will Levis is good or not is one thing, but they're going to try to give him every opportunity. I know the Bears' defense is good, but I do really like Brian Callahan. They've improved the offensive line. We'll see if DeAndre Hopkins came out and said he tore his MCL and is playing on that. But Calvin Ridley will probably go under own. I think he's a great click today. Probably more of a tournament play than cash. I promise we will get to some cash plays here in a few minutes. But I just this game's got a lot of unknown. And if you're going to get, this 25-point team total on the Bears, I just think this game people will try to attack or should try to attack, but I will play the Titans side. 2 unknowns that are a lot of fun, Tajay Spears and Tony Pollard. I'm going to be playing Spears today, and I'll be playing him with Titans defense. Try to get a little different in some of my tournament plays because I'm playing a decent amount of lineups. But just trying to correlate, I think, they've talked about them playing a 50-50 timeshare, and Tajay Spears is a guy who I think will benefit the most. No, Tony Pollard kind of looked decent, and I'm pretty worried about not playing him. But I'm going to lean into Spears, and I think he's got a really high ceiling if he hits, especially if he takes one to the house. If they're going to pass a lot and he ends up on, like third down, gets, kind of schemed in there. But over on the other side, just as far as the pass catchers for the Bears, I don't think Keenan Allen's going to get clicked, but I think he would probably be my favorite wide receiver for the Bears today, just for a solid floor and pretty decent upside. He'll kind of be the security blanket for Caleb Williams. And then DJ Moore is probably the other one I'm not going to play Roma Dunze today. I'm a little worried about it, but Shane Waldron, he kind of scares me, man. So I just would rather play the if you want to pair, say, Levis and say Tajay Spears or Calvin Ridley, and then pair him with one of the Bears wide receivers. I'd probably pair him with Keenan Allen, especially at the beginning of last year. I mean, he totally cooked for the Chargers. I know it's a little different, but just kind of mix and match there. I think there's a couple different ways to go about it. And then the last one that I do want to talk about this game, DeAndre Swift, is probably one of the best tournament plays on the slate. I don't think he's going to get clicked. I think a lot of people pretty burned out by DeAndre Swift, but if Shane Waldron kind of leans into protecting the rookie quarterback, running the ball, DeAndre Swift's a guy who can make a lot of plays and ends up kind of going under the radar that nobody's going to play. So, um, other than that, that's really all I got. You could probably mix and match the defenses here. I'm not playing Bears defense, even though I know it's good, but I will play some Titans defense, just kind of get some leverage off a rookie quarterback in his first NFL start. So, we're going to start getting into some of the fun ones before we get into the afternoon slate here. But Jaguars and the Dolphins going to get a lot of ownership in this game. I think that some people are going to play Trevor Lawrence today. I'm not. I just don't think Trevor Lawrence has a ceiling. And that's probably going to bite me in the ass, but we'll get there when we get there. But I do think the Tua stacks are always viable. And I think there's a lot of different ways you can go about it. So, especially if you're playing cash today over on FanDuel, Tyreek Hill will be the highest owned wide receiver, probably by a million outside of Andre Yoshivas, and rightfully so. I don't think you can go in to FanDuel cash this week without Tyreek Hill. And, I just think that's a very dangerous game to play because his ceiling outcome. Devon Achan is 7,200 over on FanDuel, and he's pretty cheap over on DraftKings as well. I think he's going to get clicked a lot. And I think a lot of people are going to pair him and uh, Tyreek Hill in the same lineups just for price, if you're going to get guys with those upsides. But I think Achan's a great click today. One of my favorite clicks on the day is Raheem Mostert getting leverage off both Tyreek Hill and Devon Achan, and I don't think anybody's going to play him. He had 20 touchdowns last year. It's cheaper than Devon Achan. I don't know why people don't want to play him. He will be in most of my tournament lineups today, and I think that's the way to kind of get different, kind of beat this game a little bit. But other than that, Jalen Waddle will go under owned. I think he's fun tournament play. If you want to play the Tua double, say, kind of mix and match. My Tua double today will be with Raheem Mostert and Jalen Waddle. And I do think that Jonnu Smith is a great punt, especially with all the injuries at wide receiver for the Dolphins. If you want to play that over on DraftKings, he'll end up being pretty cheap. And even on FanDuel, too. We saw Jonnu Smith have some stealing games for Atlanta last year, and it just ends up working really well for him. But on the other side, I think Brian Thomas will get a little bit of ownership. He's in a great spot, but I just if you want to have a bring back Christian Kirk, we haven't seen him since he got injured last year, but he had a really high floor when he did play last year. Even though I hope that Doug Peterson is calling plays again, I believe that is the case from Press Taylor, who I thought was horrific last year. And other than that, Evan Ingram, especially in cash today, I think people are going to play him for his floor. I'm not playing any Evan Ingram. If I wanted to have a bring back, I'd probably play Brian Thomas or I'd say Gabe Davis. I think a lot of people are scared of him, but I think he's got more work than people expect coming to him. The last thing I do want to talk about this game is Travis Etienne. I don't think anybody's going to click him, and I think he's probably one of the best tournament plays on the day. We've seen his ceiling. He's fresh coming off last year, where the end of the season ended up pretty good, but there was a really long stretch. I think it was like 4 or 5 games where he was just absolutely brutal to start. But we know he's got the receiving chops. We know they're going to try to run the ball a little bit. And then outside of Tank Bigsby, who looked pretty bad last year, I don't think anybody else is really going to compete with him. But he's one of these guys. He's a little more expensive over on FanDuel. He ends up being 7,500. Let me check on DraftKings just real quick here. As this loads, maybe. but that's why. Doo-doo-doo. Travis Etienne. Maybe, maybe not. Anyways, we'll get that to work here in a second. But Travis Etienne, there we go. Just took a second. Ends up being, let's see here. Well, it'll load in a second. Anyways, but Travis Etienne, like I said, will end up being one of the better tournament plays as far as running backs go. I just don't think that anybody's going to play him. But one of my favorite plays, like I said, is Mostert out of this game. I think a lot of people are going to play this game, and it ends up being a pretty good one to stack as well. And then the other one, probably one of my favorites of the day, will end up being the Arizona Cardinals going to Buffalo. I think both these defenses are in pretty bad spots. Bills' defense is already hurt. Matt Milano's out. Sets up really nice for Trey McBride. And then on the other side, Josh Allen will have a lot of ownership, but he's probably in one of the best spots of the day. Going up against the Cardinals, who probably will have one of the worst defenses in the NFL. Just no playmakers on that side of the ball. But Josh Allen is going to be my cash game quarterback today, and he will probably be decently high owned between him and let's see there. Whoops. Just go over here real quick. Between him and Anthony Richardson, I think he'll end up being one of the higher owned quarterbacks, and I'm going to play him in cash. I just think he's got the ceiling there over Anthony Richardson, who I think a lot of people will play. And then if that Justin Fields news comes out, I think a lot of people are going to play Fields as well. But on the other side, Kyler is going. I'm going to be playing a lot of Kyler Murray today. We saw the end of the year with the offense getting a lot better. Yeah, it's just down. But like I said, McBride is in a great spot. He's going to have some ownership, especially I'll be playing him in my cash lineup too. And then Dalton Kincaid on the other side sets up pretty nice too if he gets a full workload. Dawson Knox is a guy nobody's talking about. He's probably a good punt play over on DraftKings if you want to get a cheap portion of this game. And then two of the other guys, or one other guy who's going to be really high owned is James Conner. He's a guy who will probably end up seeing 90% of the workload for the Cardinals, and we know his ceiling. I mean, he can get 20 points right off the bat, so he'll be a cash game play for me. And I think I'm going to mix and match him in tournaments as well. A couple guys on the Cardinal side, Marvin Harrison Jr. For as high as we've drafted him all offseason, I'm not sure if people are going to play him. And he's a guy that I'm going to be double stacking with McBride. I think Kyler McBride will have some ownership. I'm not sure if they'll bring Marvin Harrison Jr. for the ride with them. And then another guy I'll be playing is Greg Dortch. If I kind of want to mix and match that, kind of stack there. Michael Wilson, probably pretty cheap. Let me check real quick on Michael Wilson. 4,500. I mean, he ends up in Andre Yoshivas land as far as price goes. And then Greg Dortch, I mean, he was a really good wide receiver too for the Cardinals last year, and 4,300 over on FanDuel. So, like I said, there's a ton of different ways you can go about this game. Like I said, in cash, I'll be playing Josh Allen, and then in tournaments, Kyler Murray will be my favorite tournament play. Over on the Bills side, James Cook is probably in the nut matchup as far as running backs go. If you're not playing Josh Allen, I think you can play James Cook in cash, and I think he's a very fun tournament play as well. I know Ray Davis has gotten a lot of hype, but just it's week one. I tend to think that rookies kind of get eased in a little bit, but I think he ends up setting up really nicely. He's in some of my tournament builds today. And then as far as the pass catchers go for Buffalo, you can kind of mix and match. I'll be playing Khalil Shakir. He'll be my favorite wide receiver. And then Dalton Kincaid, I'll have some ownership on him. But Curtis Samuel, we know we've had a 1,000-yard season, but he seems like he's coming off injury. Keon Coleman, I'm not going to have any of him. I just don't think he might. I just don't think he'll be playing full time. So, like I said, these last two games, the Jaguars, Dolphins, and then Cardinals and Bills, is probably where I'm going to get a lot of my action today. And then before we get into the afternoon games, I think we got a couple more left. Like I said, if you got any questions, comments, concerns, put them in the chat. I'll answer them. And then, like I said, we've got 5 more games left. But we'll get into that here just shortly. And then real quick, if you were playing over on DraftKings, I know we talked about FanDuel. If you were playing over on DraftKings and want to get $50 in bonus bets when you deposit $50, go to idpplus.com/DraftKings. Like I said, $50 in bonus bets when you deposit $50. So pretty good there if you want to kind of set up your account nicely. Take some long shot bets. See if you with those free bets, those bonus bets, kind of grow your bankroll there. Excuse me. But get into the afternoon games. Setting up the Commanders at the Buccaneers. Jaden Daniels is going to get played today. I will not be playing him. I think he is in a horrific matchup, and I think he's going to get smoked by Todd Bowles and Bucs defense. I'll be paying up for Bucs defense just about everywhere. They are the second highest over on FanDuel at 4,900, and then they end up 3,500 over on DraftKings. So ends up just a kind of a sweet spot for him. You get Jaden Daniels, who's going to run a lot behind one of the worst offensive lines in football. I think they can just rack up sacks, and I just don't think that the Commanders' offense is going to be any good. And I just think it's going to kind of be a brutal day for Jaden Daniels and company. Rachaad White's going to have a lot of ownership. If you want to pair him with Bucs defense, that's great correlation, especially if you think this game gets out of hand early. He's a guy who can set up for 100 yards, 2 touchdowns, or if he gets like 70 yards on the ground with the improved offensive line and then gets the receiving work too, it sets up really nice for him. He's in my cash game lineup, and then he's a great tournament play as well, even if he's got some ownership. The one stack I will be playing today as well in some larger field stuff is Baker Mayfield. I'm going to pair him with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. It ends up being pretty cheap. Washington's secondary last year was one of the worst in football, and they've done absolutely nothing to upgrade it. We've seen Baker Mayfield kind of get these wild 300-yard games out of him. Mike Evans really benefits. Chris Godwin's in the slot this year. It sets up really nicely for him. Cade Otton is a guy who runs a lot of miles on the field and will be on the field probably close to 100%. If you want to play him over on DraftKings, he's probably more one of the better punt tight ends. And like I said, I probably won't play him on FanDuel, but I think he ends up working really nicely over on DraftKings. But like I said, I'm going to be attacking this game. A lot of Rachaad White, who will be probably pretty chalky as far as cash game builds goes, but I'll be playing him in tournaments as well and correlating that with Bucs defense. Bucs defense will probably be my highest owned defense of the slate. I know defense gets very wacky, and paying up for defenses isn't ideal, but I just think this is probably the best spot of the weekend for them. But next matchup, Broncos at the Seahawks. Another fun one. I love the spot for Geno Smith. Broncos don't have a pass rush. I know they got Patrick Surtain, who just got an extension, but as far as the rest of this Broncos defense, there's just not much there, especially on the defensive line. I know that Seattle's offensive line's a little kind of iffy, but I don't think that the Broncos will be able to get there, and I think it sets up really nicely for Geno Smith. JSN is probably the most underpriced wide receiver on today's entire slate, and I'll be playing a lot of him. I've got the Geno double with him and Metcalf. Over on FanDuel, he is 5,200. I mean, that is dirt cheap for a guy who I think could easily get 100 yards today. If Patrick Surtain kind of, I wouldn't say locks on, but gives DK Metcalf a lot of looks, JSN will benefit nicely. I'm not really too worried about Tyler Lockett. And then over on, he's 4,900 over on DraftKings. So just a sweet deal for JSN. He's probably my third highest owned wide receiver today, behind Nico Collins. And then, just kind of mix and match in there. I think he's a great play. Another play, if you think that this game will get out of hand, is Kenneth Walker, the home run ability, an awesome tournament play, especially if you want to pair him with Mike McDonald's defense. If you don't think that the Bo Nix train can get there as far as the Broncos offense, because outside of Cortland Sutton, I mean, it's pretty bad. But one other thing I do want to talk about as far as the Broncos side, I will be playing a little bit of the running backs, Javonte Williams and Jaleel McLaughlin. I'll be playing Jaleel McLaughlin on DraftKings just for the price. If he ends up kind of being like the receiving back. And if they get in a scenario where they're playing from behind, I think he benefits nicely from it. And then Javonte Williams, if he gets a full workload, I think he's one of those mix and match running backs for tournaments. I wouldn't play him in cash, but I do think he is a kind of a fun volume tournament bet, especially if you're somebody who thinks that the Broncos can keep up a little bit. But next game, Raiders at the Chargers. I do not have much on this game. Chargers defense, I think, is in play, even though they stink against Gardner Minshew. I just don't believe in Luke Getsy. I don't believe in the Raiders offense. I know Devontae Adams is cool and Brock Bowers is cool and all, but it's just so hard to. I just can't do it. But I do think that the Chargers on the other side, the offensive line will hold up from the defensive line of the Raiders. Guys like Max Crosby, the guy from Miami that they just brought in. I do think that there's a scenario where this game can kind of get a little goofy. I'm not playing it, but if you want to stack Herbert, say with Josh Palmer, who will be another wide receiver who's way under the radar, probably the wide receiver one for the Chargers, and people just kind of not clicking on that. But I do think that Josh Palmer ends up being a really fun click today in tournaments. And I think, he's a guy who's got a little bit more of a ceiling than other people, uh, you know, think so. Other than that, Devontae Adams is probably a decent wide receiver click, but I can't do it. I think he's a guy who can end up with like a 40% target share. We saw that last year where he's just the last guy left, and then he ends up just kind of getting there on volume. He's probably a better play on DraftKings if you're going to play him. I'm not personally. And then the other guys, Jacoby Myers, I'm not clicking him. And then Brock Bowers, a guy I would rather fully punt than play that mid-tier tight end game. And then Zamir White, only other guy on the Raiders, but I'm not leaning into that. The only other thing, if you want to get real goofy as far as running backs go, Gus Edwards, probably sets up nice. He can fall in the end zone twice, pay off his salary, and ends up being a little bit of relief to some of the other guys. Give me just a second here. 6,000. I mean, that's a way to really get unique, especially if you want to pair him with Chargers defense. If, like I said, I will play a little bit of Chargers defense. I just don't think that they're going to kind of get there. But like I said, I'm not playing too much of this game. But I do think that for somebody who wants to get real goofy, probably large field stuff, probably a game to attack if you want, kind of buy into Herbert, one of these lower owned quarterbacks. So I don't know, man. Might be a little bit unlucky, just a tad bit. It's week one. It's only up from here. Just saying. Just saying. But next game, we got two left, and then we'll wrap it up. If you got any questions, I'll have my flag plants, and we'll go from there. We saw this last year with the Browns, where some of these games that had low totals end up kind of getting into these nuclear shootouts with Joe Flacco, and I think it actually kind of sets up well here as well. So Cleveland Browns the Cowboys at the Cleveland Browns. I don't think a lot of people are going to play this game. I'm going to lean into it. Cowboys just got a new defensive coordinator, Mike Zimmer, from Minnesota. He's a pretty good defensive coordinator, but especially this secondary is pretty, banged up. I know they have Micah Parsons, but the Cleveland Browns offensive line has gotten healthier. I don't think it's as good as it was last year, but I do think it's gotten better, and I think it can hold up the pass rush for the Cowboys. Dak Prescott's probably not going to have any ownership today. CeeDee Lamb's going to be a guy that's going to go under-owned. And then Rico Dowdle, I don't think anybody's going to click him. I think he's an unbelievable tournament play if you think that the Cowboys can keep up. One side I am playing, and if you need to close your ears for it, that's fine. But the Deshaun Watson stack with David Njoku and Amari Cooper, we've seen both of these guys have nuclear ceilings. I think that Kevin Stefanski is going to try to establish it as far as passing instead of running the ball. We saw it last year. Like I said, especially with Nick Chubb out, I just think that they're going to try their best. And, if Watson stinks, he stinks. But you can say what you want. He's probably a very good fantasy football play as far as his rushing ability. And then if they actually pass and he does well, sets up really well. Jerome Ford's another guy people aren't going to click. I think he's fine. I'm not going to play him personally. But I do think there is one way that this game can get a little wonky. And I think Brown's defense is a very fun tournament play. You got to pay up a little bit for him. But as far as the way that the Browns defense can get there, we saw it last year. Cowboys really have CeeDee Lamb, and that's about it. If they lock down CeeDee Lamb and the offensive line who's starting some rookies, if Myles Garrett gets to him, gets a couple sacks, ends up pick six. We've seen Dak kind of have those games or a fumble, like I said on these sacks. I think that the Browns defense can be the wild card, and then if you pair them just on the other side, if Amari Cooper goes off, or if you even want to play Jerome Ford, I'm not going to click him today, or David Njoku if you want to get different at the tight end position. I think it's an awesome tournament play. But I'll be leaning into this game a little bit more than most. I'll be playing the Deshaun Watson side. But Dak, we've seen his ceiling. He's not going to be played much, but I think he's an awesome tournament play. I wouldn't play these guys in cash, and I probably wouldn't play CeeDee Lamb in cash this week. I'd rather play Tyreek if you're going to play that game. But Dak Prescott 7,800. Deshaun Watson is down here at 7,100. So I mean, he's in the Jaden Daniels tier. I'd probably play Watson over Jaden Daniels. Might be a hot take, but um, like I said, I'm going to lean into this game. I think it's going to go under owned, and I think it's got the place to shoot out. So I got a question here. I just need one guy to hit an over or under on fantasy points for the noon slate. What is your guy? Let's say Nico Collins. So I think he probably ends up being one of the best wide receivers on the slate today. Ends up in an awesome matchup against the Colts, and I'll get to him real quick here at the end. But I'll say Nico Collins there, and then let's see here if there's anybody else. Probably Devin Singletary as well. I think people are underestimating how much of a workload he's going to get. But last game here, if you're playing over on FanDuel, this is not going to be a DraftKings game, but the Rams at the Lions. I think this game is going to get kind of lost in the sauce. And I think this sets up really nice for Jared Goff in the dome, going up against the Rams defense that just lost Aaron Donald, just got rid of their, green dot linebacker, basically calls the defense when he's on the field. There's a bunch of scrubs, and I think this sets up awesome for Jared Goff. He can get the 300-yard game. Amon-Ra is a guy that I'll be playing in FanDuel Cash, and I'll be playing him with Tyreek Hill. If you play Andre Yoshivas, you can get there and put both of them in the lineup together. Sets up really nice. I think if I'm going to play any of the running backs, I'll play Montgomery. I know Jahmyr Gibbs kind of had an injury, and I think they'll probably just try to lean on Montgomery until Gibbs gets healthy. So on the other side, or Laporta is probably a fun click, better tournament play just because of how expensive he is. I mean, he is the highest owned. He's 8K over on FanDuel. I mean, he gets in the wide receiver range like Puka Nacua, Mike Evans. Just easier to pay up for wide receiver at 8K than it is over, I guess DraftKings, but this game isn't on there unless you're playing Showdown slate. On the other side, I think it's a terrible matchup for Kyren Williams going up against the Lions defense. One of the most stout run defenses in football, and just added DJ Reader, who's one of the best tackles in the game. I just don't think that Kyren Williams is going to be able to get there. Offensive line injuries for the Rams already. I do think that Matthew Stafford will be in a spot to sling it against the Detroit secondary. Is kind of iffy. I'm not a big Aaron Glenn guy, but if you want to play the Stafford double with Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, I think Cooper Kupp, just because he's cheaper, will have a little bit more ownership than Puka Nacua. And then if you want to add a dart throw, I think Colby Parkinson is an unbelievable punt tight end this week. He's the guy who can end up paying off with a touchdown in the red zone. We saw that when he was at Stanford. Didn't get a lot of playing time just because Seattle had 400 tight ends in that room. But I do think that he ends up being a great spot. And I think that if Jared Goff and the Lions just keep going off, I think it sets up for a spot that Stafford's got to sling it and kind of try to play keep up, and that's how they get there instead of just this game being ultra competitive. So I do have a Stafford double today, and I think you can mix and match those guys. And if you need a tight end to punt, I think Colby Parkinson's probably my favorite tight end play. So I think that is it for the games. We'll get into just kind of my flag plans for the week real quick. If you have any more questions, just let me know. I'm over on the Twitter machine at Jameson Rules. There we go. I got that right for once. But as far as flag plans go, first up, I love the CJ Stroud stuff. Nico Collins is my favorite wide receiver on the slate today. I think he's a guy in that mid tier who will be the slate breaker. I think he gets like 100 yards and the possibility for 2 touchdowns. If you like Tank Dell, I think he's a great spot too. But I'm going to lean into Nico Collins. I don't think he's going to have a whole lot of ownership. And I think if you're playing the Stroud stack, people will play Tank Dell because they think of the higher upside, and he's also the cheaper wide receiver. Another guy I really like, Raheem Mostert. It gets the leverage off of both Tyreek Hill and Devon Achane ownership, but it just ends up setting up really nice for him. And then my last one will be Kyler Murray. I think a lot of people are going to be playing Trey McBride today, and I think that's fine, but I think Kyler Murray will end up having to kind of play keep up with Josh Allen. I think that the Cardinals will cover. Really like the Cardinals team this year. I think Kyler's probably going to be a easily top 5 up there to top 3 quarterback this season. I think it starts here against Buffalo. So I think that is it. Here every week over at IDP Plus, check them out. If you play IDP, betting, college stuff, we've got it all. We also have Discord too. There's a link. Come find me. I'll be in Discord answering any DFS questions. But other than that, I am Jameson Rules. You can find me here on the Twitter machine. I'll do the Rider Dynasty podcast with JJ Winter and Joe Harlow every week as well, going over dynasty rookies, that sort of stuff. Great show over there. But I appreciate everybody who commented. Jesus. But if you guys have any questions, like I said, don't be scared to reach out and enjoy week 1. We do this every year. The air's a little different. Life gets a little better. Hope you guys have a great week 1. Hope you win a bunch of money, and I hope to see you all next week. Peace out.
Thank you for watching the IDP Plus YouTube network. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Be sure to tap the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload new content.